Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for this opportunity for us to talk about this important issue, Lord. I just pray that you give us discernment, give us wisdom, give us your words, Lord. Speak through us, help us to reach many. I pray, Lord, that you would just work through me today as I present this, that you'd help us to be winsome, help us to be effective, and help us just to do this for your glory. And we just ask for your help, and we ask that you would intervene, on this matter, and that we know it's going to take a miracle, but we pray that this would be defeated, Lord. And we pray that the fervor that we have over this amendment would not die, and that we would continue to try to reach people on this issue of life, Lord. And we just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. So you guys are probably, I'm assuming, they're taping, and so I am going to go through this so that even if you have a level of understanding, I want to make sure that this is something that will, get across to everybody. So I'm just going to run through the whole thing. So my name, and my background is I was an English major. I worked as a writer and an editor, so I love language, and I didn't really look into this. I knew I was going to vote no on it, but I didn't really know everything involved in it until about a month or so ago. I thought, okay, it's time that I start looking up all the different things on the ballot and looking at the full text, because I always look at the full text. And when I pulled this up, I was shocked. I thought, this is not at all what the ballot language says, and I wonder if anybody really understands this. I wrote up a bunch of notes on all of the things that were red flags to me, and I sent them off to a friend of mine who is an attorney. She and her husband are both attorneys, and I said, okay, I understand language, I understand English, but I don't understand legalese. Am I off base on this? And she got back to me 2 days later, and she said, not at all. And she even gave me some additional information. So this is based on how we've kind of taken this apart. But the other thing that I do, that I love to do, is I teach critical thinking for the purpose of teaching people how to be persuasive over cultural issues. And it isn't enough to just have data and information. You need to know how to persuade people. And I have heard some people on this topic just saying, oh, well, people just don't want to listen. I'm just getting shut down. And so then I ask them, well, how are you approaching this? And that's why I put this whole thing together. So we're going to go through the amendment, but toward the end, we're going to talk about steps, ways to open conversations and how to talk to people about it. So, hopefully we can get through it. And are you guys pressed for time? No. Okay, awesome. All right. So the Missouris for Constitutional Freedom was a group that was put together specifically to get this amendment passed. They called the amendment the Right to Reproductive Freedom Initiative. And obviously, it's going to be on the ballot November 5th, but absentee ballots have already been dropped off in person since September 24th. And then the early voting started this past Tuesday on October 22nd. My husband actually is working at the early voting polls, and you had to agree to do Monday through Saturday, and he's there from 6:30 a.m. until 4:30. So my point here is this is really urgent because we already got people voting, and there's already going to be too late for some people. Ballot language. So it's what you will see in the voting booth in November, and you probably are aware there's always a battle over the ballot language. And the goal, supposed goal, is for it to be fair ballot language that's clear, that the voter can go in and very quickly figure out what they're voting for. But words are usually crafted to sway the voter, and I will argue it doesn't matter what side you're on, you are going to try to make sure that it's worded in such a way that it goes the direction you want it to go. This is the responsibility of the Secretary of State, and our Secretary of State here is Jay Ashcroft. And this was his proposed ballot language. and I'm going to read it. A yes vote will enshrine, we'll come back to that, the right to abortion at any time of a pregnancy in the Missouri Constitution. Additionally, it will prohibit any regulation of abortion, including regulations designed to protect women undergoing abortions, and prohibit any civil or criminal recourse against anyone who performs an abortion and hurts or kills the pregnant women. He submitted this ballot language and he was sued. And the thing that's interesting, there's nothing inaccurate in this language. And to prove that there's nothing inaccurate in this language, they threw this lawsuit, and the courts determined, this is a news article on it, the courts determined that his version of the ballot language would be on display in the voting booth. Not in the voting booth, at the polling place, on a poster or something. Well, if you're voting in a library or a school, and there's posters everywhere, I mean, how many of us read the posters on, I might look at the kids' artwork, but I don't. So anyway, it's not what's going to appear on the ballot, and that's generally when people walk into the booth is when they start reading. And many of them go in thinking, I'm voting for president, and they think, oh, great, there's judges, there's propositions, and they just rely on what is written on there. So that's a big deal. This is the final ballot language that the courts came out with. I'm not going to read through this because what we're going to do is we're going to go through it piece by piece and compare what's in the actual text. It's important for you to know that in the state of Missouri, it's easy for it to end up in our Constitution as an amendment, but it's not as easy to come out. And I did ask my friend, who is an attorney, to find out how, if you discover, wow, that was a big mistake, what do you do once something has become part of our Constitution? And so she looked through their law libraries, the Missouri law libraries, and she finally did an AI search on it. And she said, basically, that they do detail the processes and principles related to amending the Constitution and the irrevocability of amendments once adopted. Thanks. Hey, everybody. Yeah, no problem. I'm sorry we started. I didn't know if anybody else was coming. Ava's going to pass out some papers for you guys. And I'm so glad to see all these students here. Understand that we're going to be looking at some legal language that's going to be extremely boring, and I can dance or sing to make it more interesting, but anybody here close to voting age of the students?
Probably the closest.
And how old are you?
16.
Okay, awesome. So this is the kind of stuff you're going to have to weed through when you take that first vote, so take it seriously. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, we're talking about the irrevocability of a constitutional amendment once it's adopted. So even though we have papers being passed out, I want you guys, unless you're going to take notes, to kind of keep your eyes up here and stay focused on this so you don't miss anything. This is a crazy aspect of Missouri law. Once a constitutional amendment becomes part of the Missouri Constitution, it operates and prevails over any conflicting previous provisions of the Constitution or laws. That's because the amendment becomes part of the fundamental law. And that sounds really boring, but here's what it means. You know, there are no provisions or cases identified in the search results that discuss or allow for the withdrawal of an amendment after it's been ratified and adopted by the voters. So that's why it says up there, easy in, not so easy out. Cannot be altered or repealed by the legislature once adopted except through another constitutional amendment process. This is the really sticky, ugly thing about how we do constitutional amendments in Missouri. You only need, a percentage of the number of votes cast for a governor in the last election. It's very strange to get those signatures to get an amendment put on the ballot. So in 2022 and 2024, in the general election ballots, only 171,592 signatures were required to get an amendment put onto the ballot. That's a fraction, a tiny little fraction of the voting populace. And so once you get it onto the ballot, which they were able to get 300,000 signatures through some very interesting means. This is the petition that they went around and had people signed. I don't know if you saw people outside of, the Y, outside of grocery stores getting voters to sign this to get this amendment put on the ballot. What you see up here, it says, do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to? And what's included here is just the ballot language. The interesting thing is that the entire full text that's going into our Constitution is on the backside. And I watched many, many, many people gather signatures, and never once did I see anybody say, oh, did you want to see what the entire thing is? They read this, and we'll see what the problem is with that, and then they say, oh yeah, I'll sign that. So, and to be honest, I didn't even know that it was on the backside. I didn't even know until I got a hold of one of these. So given these points of information, a constitutional amendment is ratified, becomes part of the Missouri Constitution. It cannot be withdrawn, remains in effect until it's altered by another constitutional amendment. So here's the bad news. So it gets put on the ballot, and you only need one vote over 50%. So it's a 51% majority. So if you get half the people, vote yes, it only takes one more vote, and then boom, it's in our Constitution. This is how we got medical marijuana embedded into our Constitution, and the following year, recreational marijuana in our Constitution. This is how the cloning using human embryos ended up in the Constitution. The Missouri state Constitution is thicker than the federal Constitution because of the ease with which we can just willy-nilly add things to it. There are a lot of people, I would be included, that would like to see the process change so it's not that easy. But if this passes, I don't want to see the process changed yet, because we are going to have to work hard to get a constitutional amendment, to get it changed, to get it taken out. So this is a really important, crazy issue. So now we're going to look at the ballot language versus the Constitution language. So on the ballot, and you should all have a piece of paper up there, and it's the one that is a full sheet of paper, but it's only half of it is on there because ballot language has to be brief. So it says, do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to, and then it's followed by a series of bullet points. So you always want to read that question first to kind of clarify what are they asking. And so it says, establish a right to make decisions about reproductive health care, including abortion and contraceptives. And then they just threw English grammar out the window and said, with any governmental interference of that right presumed invalid, which translated means without any governmental interference. Well, what it actually says in the Constitution, because that sounds, okay, it's kind of squishy, but it sounds sort of reasonable. They also say, and then removed Missouri's ban on abortion. Now, before I go on to what it says in the Constitution or the proposed text, which is on the back, removing Missouri's ban on abortion, there are a few things you need to understand about Missouri's ban. First of all, the ban that was put in place in 2022 does allow for an exception for the life and the health of the mother. That's already in there. Some people think that if you are on this side in terms of, I am staunchly pro-life, no exceptions, obviously the health and life of the mother, but no exceptions whatsoever, that the other side is over here is like, well, I think that women have a right to have an abortion. But if we're looking at extremes, this extreme is through all 9 months, no exception for any reason, etc. I'm going to tell you today that this is not this and this. This goes way beyond this. And where most Missourians are is somewhere in here. And there are a lot of people who are pro-life that are what you would call moderate pro-life. I know the guy from the Coalition for Life calls them the squishy lifers. I'm like, I'll call them moderates. There are people who say that they're Reagan conservative pro-lifers that believe in the exceptions would be with the exception of rape and incest. And then there's some that say, well, I wish we had done a heartbeat bill. Some who say, well, I wish we had a fetal viability bill. So keep that in mind. And this is what the actual proposed text is, and this is on the other side. But you also have one that is comparing them bit by bit on here, and I think it goes in order. If it doesn't, I apologize. So anyway, the government shall not deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom, which is the right to make and carry out decisions about all matters relating to reproductive health care, including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, birth control, abortion care, miscarriage care, and respectful birthing conditions. Now, that's a lot, and so I've color-coded it. The red highlights are things that are very definitive. It is just rock-solid language. Shall not. Stuff in blue is never really defined. In a couple places, they make it seem like it's defined, but you'll see it's not really defined. The things that are highlighted in yellow are opening a wide door to interpretation. So first of all, when we're talking about the government shall not deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom, I'm going to tell you right here, the word person appears throughout the entire text for all of this. The proposed text is going into the Constitution. It only says person. Never once does it say woman anywhere in the text. It does say woman once on the ballot language, but that's not what's going into our Constitution, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. Reproductive freedom, it never once says abortion, surgical care. So it says reproductive freedom. It says reproductive health care. Now, it does say down at the bottom abortion care, but it lists a whole bunch of things. So I want to point out the things in white: prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, birth control, miscarriage care. All of that is legal right now under the abortion ban. So the fact that that's included is to throw off the idea, make it seem like, oh boy, we need this. We have that. We have that. I don't know what respectful birthing conditions are, but I mean, I'm for them. I'm not quite sure what that means. But here's the important thing to note on this section. It's section 36 will be in the Constitution, and then the numbers are what are referred to as subsections. So in subsection 2, all matters relating to reproductive health care. All matters. And then it says including. It makes it seem like we're going to tell you what reproductive health care means, but when it says but not limited to, that means, okay, we're listing some things, but that's not all. Well, what is all? Well, we don't know. It doesn't tell us what all is. It just says not limited to. So that's why I said in the yellow, it's just kind of opening up that barn door. So moving on here. Oh, one other thing. I want you to look as we go through the Constitution language here. It's not even in the ballot language. Do you see age anywhere? I already told you on the Constitution it doesn't say woman anywhere, but nowhere does it say age. Okay, ballot language. Do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to allow regulation of reproductive health care? That sounds interesting. It sounds like we're going to have some regulation. To improve or maintain the health of the patient. What moron doesn't want the woman to be taken care of? I mean, this sounds very reasonable, but what does it say in subsection 3? It says the right to reproductive freedom shall not be denied, interfered with, delayed, or otherwise restricted. So delayed. I mean, we can't wait. We can't. Doctor can't say, why don't you wait? Why don't you look into this? Why don't you talk to your parents? Why don't you pray about this? Can't delay it. Can't interfere with it. If you're a crisis pregnancy center, you can't say, hey, there are alternatives. There are these other possibilities. Now, it doesn't come out and say we're going to get rid of crisis pregnancy centers, but this is pretty definitive language. Shall not. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's going to mention this 3 more times in the constitutional text. But let's go on. It says, unless the government demonstrates that such action is justified by a compelling government interest achieved by the least restrictive means. Well, they never tell us what that means. Least restrictive means. I don't know what that means. But let's look at compelling government interest. Oh, we can't yet, because they're going to double down on line 1. Any denial, interference, delay, or restriction of the right to reproductive freedom shall be presumed invalid. So basically said the same thing as line 1 in different wording. Now we're going to talk about governmental interest. A governmental interest is compelling only if it is for the limited purpose and has the limited effect of improving or maintaining the health of a person seeking care. Okay, so, and then also is consistent with widely accepted clinical standards of practice, etc. Okay, so here's the thing. They're saying that, okay, the government could interfere if it is to maintain the health of the patient. So let's say that a doctor decides that this procedure, whatever it is, and we don't know exactly what this procedure is because it's very, very vague and very, very broad, but this reproductive procedure could be abortion surgery, it could be chemical abortion, abortion pill, possibly, I don't like to start with this, but possibly puberty blockers. How so? Well, if a young girl decides she doesn't want to start her menstrual period, doesn't want to have babies, then all of a sudden, that could be a reproductive issue. It's just not clear because it already said not limited to. But here's the interesting thing. So if a doctor says, I don't think that'd be in your best interest, then they double down, triple down, and does not infringe on that person's autonomous decision making. So she or he, it says person, nowhere does it say woman, says, you know what, I want to go through with it anyway. And the doctor, the person, the caregiver, whoever it is, says, I don't think that this is in your best interest of your health. This trumps everything. If that person has autonomous decision making. Do you see age mentioned anywhere here? So that person could be a minor and gets to make that decision. Now, what minor would be able to go and pay for a doctor's visit and go and try to see this? Well, we'll see that in a minute. But Planned Parenthood, 30 years ago, you could walk into a Planned Parenthood and you could say, I want this, and I don't have a job, and they didn't ask any proof of that, and then they would say, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. It was taxpayer funded. So let's look into that. Do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to require the government not to discriminate in government programs, funding, and other activities? We don't know what they are, they're never described. Against persons providing or obtaining reproductive health care. I think in this case, the ballot language is a little more clear because it actually says government programs and then mentions the word funding. The actual text does say, though, the government shall not discriminate against persons providing or obtaining reproductive health care or assisting another person in doing so. What possible things could be a basis for discrimination in this case? Anybody have any ideas? Age. There's no age written in here. Oh, I'm sorry, you're too young. Oh no, that's discrimination. You aren't too young. What about ability to pay? You know, oh, I can't afford this procedure, but I want it. So it's just, you know, I have a sign in my yard that says no on 3, but I wrote in Sharpie on it, I said, too broad, too vague, too extreme. And I did that on purpose, which was kind of vague, because I wanted neighbors to ask me, what do you mean by that? And sure enough, they have, and have had the opportunity to explain exactly what I meant by that. So that's why I added that to the sign. This section here is interesting. I was not aware of this until I spoke with somebody who is in law. I didn't even understand what it meant at first. I'm going to read it just for fun, because it's crazy, makes no sense. If any provision of this section or the application thereof to anyone or to any circumstance is held invalid, the remainder of those provisions and the application of such provisions to others and other circumstances shall not be affected thereby. So that is legalese, and it is actually a severability clause. And so years ago, I worked at a title company, and when we would copy over things from the deed to title, you'd have to look for if there were discrepancies. If there was something that was not copied exactly accurately, then the whole thing was invalid. Severability clause means, let's say that they discover that this section here is unconstitutional, or this section here conflicts with an existing law, or somehow is invalid. This is saying, oh, but that means that you can't throw out the whole thing. Everything else is going to hold true. So it's a very interesting, I'm telling you, the person that put this together knows and understands law. This was not done on accident. Now, this time we're starting on the Constitution side, and you'll see why. No person shall be penalized, prosecuted, or otherwise subjected to adverse action based on their actual, potential, perceived, or alleged pregnancy outcomes, including, again, here, what is a pregnancy outcome? Well, they're going to tell us, sort of, but not really, including, but not limited to, miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion. Nobody is getting penalized or prosecuted for having a miscarriage or a stillbirth. If a baby is born stillborn, I mean, the fact that those words are put in there is to throw off the idea, to lead you to believe that we need this passed because we've got people having miscarriages going to be thrown in jail. And that's crazy, because this has been law now, or not, the ban has been law now for 2 years, and we don't have women in jail because they've had a miscarriage or a stillbirth. And pregnancy outcomes, including but not limited to. What other outcomes could there be? A baby accidentally survives an abortion, and then the baby's left to die. That's a possible outcome. I mean, it's a wide open door here. In addition to that, it says, no, nor shall any person assisting a person. That's not explained or described or defined. Is that the abortion doctor? Is that a nurse? Is that a boyfriend or a friend driving somebody to a clinic? I would argue that this is where you see these signs that say stop human trafficking through this. This opens a door to somebody who has trafficked somebody going and taking that girl who gets pregnant to an abortion clinic and not being questioned, not being penalized. That does open the door. I don't think that's the strongest argument. I've had somebody who works in, at a crisis pregnancy center and works in, other people say to me, well, is it a possibility? Yes, but that's difficult. And I'll just tell you, we've seen through undercover videos of Planned Parenthood, there already are Planned Parenthood facilities that are not reporting these people anyway. But to have that enshrined in our Constitution is pretty scary. And if this is so benign and if they want to be transparent about it, then I ask you this: why is the ballot language this? Do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to, oops, it's not in there. If you look at this and you look at this, you see if you can find something where it was reworded or it was, and if you find it, let me know and I'll change my slides. But I've done this class like probably a dozen times and nobody's been able to find it because they left it out. And I would argue this is the next one is going to be the one that we get to next, but that's the strongest argument. But this is one of the strongest arguments, because I would ask people, if this is not a big deal, why did they not put it on the ballot language? Because if you'll recall, in Jay Ashcroft's proposed ballot language, it said that there would be no penalization. I don't have his right in front of me, but it mentioned this, and they took it out. The courts took it out. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And then here, this I think is your single strongest argument that you can make to people in Missouri. The ballot language says, do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to allow abortion to be restricted or banned after fetal viability, except to protect the life or health of the woman. Now, got three things to say about this. First of all, woman appears here, nowhere in the text of the actual proposed amendment. And it says, except to protect the life or health of the woman. That's already in our law right now. And people ask, why are we doing this amendment? Well, because the abortion ban went through the legislative process and it is a law. This will be an amendment to our state constitution. But we already protect the life and health of the woman. What is the words, do you want to amend the Missouri Constitution to allow abortion to be restricted or banned after fetal viability? What does that lead you to believe that this amendment is going to do?
Heartbeat.
Well, heartbeat wouldn't necessarily be fetal viability, but
Oh, true. Yeah.
probably around 22, 24 weeks. Yeah, exactly. So fetal viability when the child could live outside the womb. So it sounds like this amendment is saying, all right, we're going to allow abortion up to the point when a child could live outside the womb. And this is what I hear from people all the time. Well, I would have preferred a heartbeat bill, but at least it has a restriction. And I said, no, it doesn't. So remember in subsection 3, where it said 3 different times, the government shall not deny, delay, blah, blah. And then it said it again, and then it said it again. This one says, notwithstanding subsection 3, basically saying, well, despite the fact that we kind of doubled down and tripled down in that last section, we're going to do this. The General Assembly may enact laws that regulate the provision of abortion after fetal viability. May enact. This is not doing it. They're saying, if you want to pass a law later on, okay, go ahead. You can pass a law. The General Assembly refers to the legislature. And so they're saying, yeah, we'll let you pass a law. But what we're putting in the Constitution is we'll let you pass a law that'll regulate the provision of abortion after fetal viability. So it's saying, forget heartbeat law. That's not happening. This is going to be in our Constitution. And then it goes on to say, provided that under no circumstance shall the government delay, interfere with, deny, etc., or otherwise restrict an abortion. So it says it again. So this is the quadrupling down. But it gives you a little squishy caveat here that in the good faith judgment of a treating healthcare professional is needed to protect the life or physical or mental health of the pregnant person. Now, you've probably already heard this issue of the mental health. What is mental health? If I'm pregnant and I didn't want the baby, I'm under severe mental duress at this point. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what is mental health? It's really never described or defined, but here's where people don't understand. That's not even your biggest argument. And I'm going to show you, there's a couple articles that came out that even people who are on the side of voting no on 3 don't get this. That bottom paragraph here doesn't even matter because this amendment isn't doing that. This amendment is a no restriction at any time of pregnancy, abortion, limitless abortion amendment. That's it. This down here is saying, and if you do pass a law later on, we're going to put some restrictions on that future law. That's, I think, the most shocking thing to me is I hear people out there arguing, yeah, the problem is that mental health. I'm like, no, this doesn't even restrict anything at that point. That is your strongest argument. Because here, we're in Missouri. So if you think that the ban went too far, is this where you are? Most people are not there, but that's where this is. And then when you add all the other stuff to it, it goes beyond that. The other thing is, if they pass a law, they define fetal viability. Keep in mind, fetal viability is pointless for this amendment, but this is for a future law. They define fetal viability. That's the point in pregnancy when, in the good faith judgment of a treating healthcare professional and based on particular facts of the case, blah, 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 that there's a significant likelihood of the fetus's sustained survival outside the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. What is that? It's not defined. I gave birth to my second son at 37 weeks. 37 weeks is considered full term in the medical community. If you go into labor at 37 weeks, they don't try to stop it or anything. They deliver the baby. Well, he was in NICU for a full week. Just lungs weren't developed and, had to have a breathing help. He's 32 years old right now. Healthy, he played baseball. He was a pitcher. Bottom line is, according to this, if I had wanted to get an abortion at 37 weeks and he needed that NICU, then it's like, well, I'm guessing, because what does extraordinary mean? If you break it down, the root of the word, extra is outside of or beyond ordinary. Do most babies end up in the NICU? No, so I guess that would be an extraordinary measure. But it's not defined. And again, I'm just going to keep saying this. It doesn't even matter how they define fetal viability for this amendment because there is no restriction after fetal viability in this amendment. This is their way of making sure that if you do pass a law in the future, we're gonna make sure that there's only so far you can go with that law. And then here they explain that, government, any little tiny town, municipality, whatever. So if you're some rural town and you don't like this, you can't pass a law in your little area saying we're not doing that here. So let's look at some other things that aren't, or another big thing that's not defined anywhere. Healthcare professional. What is a healthcare professional? They never defined it. Never defined it. So I did an AI search and this took from the American Medical Association, and they said a healthcare professional is anyone who meets these criteria. Well, that could be, a nurse, a physician's assistant, athletic trainer, a dental hygienist. I know that sounds crazy, but if we're not talking about abortion surgery and we're talking about handing out abortion pills or possibly puberty blockers, if Planned Parenthood is going to open up as soon as this passes, they're going to be open again. You go into a Planned Parenthood and you go see a nurse, and this constitutional amendment is going to allow them to be able to hand these out. Hand out those things. So what I am going to say, don't lead with this issue. I don't think this is a good lead in on the gender transition things. Now, you saw in there, it doesn't say woman, it doesn't describe reproductive health care. Reproductive health care could be hysterectomy, it could be vasectomy, it could be puberty blockers, it could be abortion pills, it could be, a lot of, anything has to do with reproduction. But there's so many articles coming out now that say things like this. Political analyst explains that Missouri Amendment 3 does not include transgender care for kids. Inside the article, it said there's nothing in Amendment 3 that talks about transgender care. Now, we just went through the language. They're right. There's nothing in there that talks about this. It doesn't say and allows for transgender care, but it says all matters, reproductive health care, including but not limited to. I mean, who knows what could be included in that? It's extremely vague and extremely broad. And why would they need to do that if this is just about abortion? I do think it's humorous that the person that they quoted is a political analyst and not a lawyer who would be able to really look at what the legal aspects of the language are. In the article, this person they quoted says the opponents think that this is the issue that they have more support from Americans on, in other words, the transgender issue. And this is not the professor, but the assistant professor of political science at UMSL. So this is not somebody who studied law. Amendment 3 seeks to legalize abortion until the point of fetal viability, which is about 24 weeks. That's what it says in this article. That I showed you. That's a lie. It doesn't legalize it up until that point. I'm not going to read it again, but that's what it says. Future opportunity if you want to enact a law at some point. This is an article from October 10th, 2024. It's in the Springfield Daily Citizen. They actually admit that there are no restrictions. If you read the entire article, it appears kind of in the second half of the article, but you have to be very savvy, a wordsmith to understand it. And let me just show you how it mentions it to kind of cover their backsides, and then it quickly deflects. It says, the amendment states that the state legislature may enact, there it is, laws that regulate abortion after fetal viability. May enact, so they admitted it. But then they immediately go into talking about things that don't matter for this amendment. Oh, it's the point at which a fetus could live outside the womb without extraordinary, et cetera, currently about 24 weeks. That doesn't matter because this amendment isn't restricting anything. This was from the Catholic Archdiocesan News, and it says Amendment 3, the article is excellent, except for this even confused the reporter. This is OBGYN, and it says under her caption in the article that there are no restrictions, and that's accurate. But in the text of the article, the reporter says, if passed, the measure would allow abortions until viability, typically around 22 to 24 weeks of pregnancy. That's not true. So I actually called the reporter because I thought this is somebody that's against Amendment 3, and this is inaccurate. So I called her up, and to her credit, she was fabulous. She called me back. I left a message, a long message explaining everything. She called me back, and I talked with her, and she is going to write a follow-up article explaining the discrepancy between the ballot language and the proposed text. So don't get angry at people. We're going to find out what is their issue, and we're going to respectfully educate them. She was so nice. I mean, we talked. It was great. So rather than just fuming in my kitchen, I called her up. All right. So now we're going to talk about, and this is something that's going to be super effective for all the kids in the room, so I hope I can get you guys focused back in now. Effective persuasion. Why don't we talk about these things with people around us when we have strong opinions? We want to be liked. Maybe you don't like conflict. Maybe you're one of those introvert people that somebody starts to argue with you and you're just like, oh, I'm out of here. It jeopardizes relationships. It's intimidating. You're thinking, I don't know law language. Do I even know enough to talk about this? You might even think it could be dangerous. I don't want somebody following me, smashing in my windows. If I have a bumper sticker on my car, are they going to slash my tires? All right, so I am going to quote from, now I'm not from the 30s, even though you might think I am, but this was written back in the Great Depression. This is Dale Carnegie, and he wrote a really iconic book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it was basically a sales book, but what our purpose here is, how are we going to keep friends and influence people? Because we do want to be an influence, but we also don't want to lose our friends. We don't want our neighbors not talking to us anymore. So how are we going to do that? He has some great advice. He said we need to show genuine interest in the person that we're talking to. And that is so important. And you're like, well, how do you do that? Well, one thing is you look them in the eye when you're talking to them. You just say your name. If it's a neighbor, you say their name. Be personable. If it's an appropriate time in your conversation to smile, smile. Don't let the heat of the moment get away from you. If you ask them a question, and you should, shut up. Let them talk. And while they're talking, listen. Don't think, oh, I can't wait to say this next point that I'm ready to just jump on it. That's not really showing interest in how they're thinking. And they will sense that. You also can give frequent, honest, heartfelt praise. And you're like, how do I praise somebody that's for this radical, crazy bill? Well, first of all, maybe they're not. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe there's somebody who would say, I'm like a Reagan exception person. I believe in, the exception of the rape, incest, and life and health of the mother. So just recognize that if somebody is willing to talk to you about this, then you can find something to praise them about. Thank you so much for being willing to have a civil discussion about this. If you're just talking nicely, then this is great. I wish more people were able to do this. I really appreciate that. Let's say that they're kind of pushing back, going, well, but what about the unwed mothers, and what about the teen pregnancies and everything? It's like, I see you have such compassion for young people. That's awesome. I do too. That's a great way to connect with people. And hopefully it's true. Hopefully you do have great compassion, because we should absolutely have that kind of compassion. Let's say that they're getting really heated and they're kind of losing their cool, and you're thinking, I have nothing nice to say to this person. You can say, I could see you're really passionate about this, because they are. And I'm going to tell you something about people that are passionate. If you can persuade them to see your side, you want that passionate person on your side. If they're apathetic, they're probably not voting anyway. I mean, they don't care. So I'll take passion over apathy any day. All right, now let's say that they're cussing at you and they're yelling at you, and you're just going, okay, it's time to, time to leave. When you leave, you take a heart check and you ask yourself, why was that person getting so angry? Why did that go south? What happened? And don't just blame them. It's so easy to walk away and think, oh, idiot. Ask yourself, was it my viewpoint, or was it the way that I presented it? And then just think, were my facial expressions kind of, while they were talking, was I doing was I showing them what I was thinking? Was it my body language? Am I standing there with my hands on my hips, my arms crossed? When they said something I didn't like, did I start backing away from them? I mean, those are things that people will pick up on. They might not even consciously pick up on them, but they're getting turned off. So, was it my tone of voice? Did I cut them off while they were talking? All of those things will get people to just shut down. So here's the thing. What wins people over? Is it viewpoint or approach? What do you guys think? It's a trick question. It's both. It's both. Because you might have a great approach, but if you have no good argument, they'll think, oh, she's so sweet, but she knows nothing. If you have great facts and data, and they might think, wow, she makes me so mad, I'm going to just vote opposite anyway. So you need both. So you need to be prepared. So is everybody okay on time? Because we kind of got started a little bit late. I want to show a 3-minute video of Michael Knowles. How many people know Michael Knowles? Okay. Now, I'm not saying I don't like Michael Knowles. I'm just going to tell you, don't do this. I am using this video clip as this is how you don't do it. And if you love him, I'm sorry. But this is not how you convince or win over your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers. So let's watch this and we're going to talk about it.
So next week there's going to be a pro-abortion speaker here talking about how abortion is a moral good from a Christian perspective. How do you argue with someone who has such an extreme position about abortion?
Well, I have an extreme position about abortion, which is that it's bad to kill babies after they're born, or as they're being born, or just before they're born, or really any time before that they're born. I think that extreme position is easy to hold and easily defensible. The question you'll have to ask is what that person's premises are. Because there are 2 points to that topic. One, that abortion is a moral good, and 2, that it is Christian to kill babies. I seem to recall some verses of scripture coming from, a guy named Jesus Christ, who talked about, he'll hold you accountable for whatever you do to the least of these, and tie a millstone around your neck, and it'd be better if it right, that guy. So I'd be curious as to what he says. I've never heard a coherent argument for abortion that did not also imply that it would be perfectly fine to kill other various human demographics. One of the arguments that cynical people make for abortion is that it's good because these kids, they'll all be on welfare and probably grow up and commit crime. And this is a very racist argument because everyone who makes that argument is saying that it's good to kill the little black kids, but you wouldn't want to kill the precious little white kids who grew up in the suburbs. And the question you have to ask him is, which young black man in an inner city would you be willing to apply that logic to at the age of 24? Look him in the eye, because they're never called out on the absolute racial bigotry of it all. In New York City, more black babies are killed in the womb than are born. That is horrific, and the future generations will look on that barbarity with great moral opprobrium, and will look on the people who advance that with great moral opprobrium. And if this fellow is a Christian, then when he gets to St. Peter's Gate someday, I have a feeling that the eternal judge is not going to look very well on him spouting horrific heresy that has led people possibly of good faith astray. He will meet the millstone in the next world, and it would be better for him to correct his views in the present. All of that is to say, you should always take the level-headed approach. Do not, you'll notice I'm not yelling or screaming about this man. I'm not yelling or screaming even about abortion, even as the governor of Virginia says we should kill babies after they're born. Because the truth is on your side. You don't need to pretend that this is some passionate interest battle that is brutal and unreasoned. For him it is, for you it's not. So I would calmly rip apart his arguments, and then I would advise him to go have a quick confession and repent before the judgment day. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't recommend you do that. There are people who call themselves Christian that are for various stages of abortion, and calling them out on that and telling them they need to go do a confession is probably not going to get them to change their mind. Now, I'm going to also point out that his argument he presents an absolute straw man argument, just assuming that people who are against abortion are for the precious little white children and not the black. That's ridiculous, because I know a lot of people that just like to have abortion for every, they don't care, every demographic. In my opinion, that's a ridiculous argument. The statistic about the babies aborted in New York City, I don't know if it's still true. I mean, I do think that is true, and it is horrific, but that's not an argument. This is not, I don't think that this is the time or the place to make this into any kind of a racial argument. I don't think that this is a political argument. I don't think that we should be talking Republican and Democratic. The bleeped word out of there was just the Democratic governor. That was referring to Northam, who was the former Virginia governor, that was fine with letting babies die if they're abortion survivors. And I believe he probably bleeped that out. They probably had to do that so that YouTube wouldn't take it down. But the bottom line is that even though he is a pro-life person, and I know I've had people argue with me and say, oh, he's changed so many people's minds. Perhaps, but if you want to keep your friends and neighbors, then that's not the approach you want to take. He points out that he doesn't yell or scream, and if anybody in here is a parent knows it doesn't work. And if you're a kid and you've yelled and screamed at your parents over something because you want something, that doesn't work either, generally. So, but he does use sarcasm. What is the audience reaction when he makes his snarky comments? They laugh. So who is his audience?
Like-minded people.
Like-minded people. Well, that's not what we're not trying to change the minds of people who already agree with us. So would he likely use this approach when debating somebody? Well, and so I put that in there because I'm thinking, no, you wouldn't do that. But people who know Michael Knowles would say, oh, yeah, he actually would. So perhaps. But my point on this is that when there are public debates between well-known public figures, did anybody see Donald Trump debate Joe Biden? Okay, all right, and then Trump and Harris. Did you see the vice presidential debates between Walz and Vance? Okay. So do you think that either one of those two people in any of those debates was actually thinking they could change the mind of the other person? No, it's for the audience. So keep in mind that if you're having a conversation and the young people's voices are just huge, we need you guys to speak out on these topics because you have so much more power than, people my age. So that's why I teach all these classes for high school students so that you guys can go and do it because nobody's going to listen to me anymore. But the point is that you may not be able to, you may be talking in a little group of friends, and maybe the guy who's arguing with you is not, agreeing with you, and they're pushing back. But these people who are standing around are listening. And I know this happens all the time in classrooms, in the college classrooms, where the professor says something really crazy, and everybody's kind of, not everybody, but there are a few people, and they're just going, am I the only one that thinks that that's insane? And then one brave person raises their hand and they say, well, actually, I heard that blah, 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 blah. What do you think about this? And they kind of push back on the professor. How many students have come up to me afterwards and said, it's so frustrating? Kids will come up to me after class and say, thank you for speaking up. And I'm going, why didn't you raise your hand? Because there's strength in numbers. So we need to be bold, we need to be winsome, which is not obnoxious, and that we need to have these conversations with people so that others will stand with us. The purpose is to change the minds of other people sometimes, and our goal should be to have a strong argument, sound thinking, factual data, but most importantly, to be a representative of Christ. And this is the mindset of Christ. I mean, he is our example for our attitude that we should have. And there's at least 3 places in Scripture where you see some version of this. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them. Now, who is in the crowds? Whole bunch of sinners. These are people who are lost. So when he looked at them, he wasn't looking at all the people in the church that were already following him and just going, oh, you're wonderful people, you're following me. He was literally looking at a bunch of people who were lost and broken and didn't know what they were doing and had compassion on them. So we need to have that same compassion. People call the art of asking good questions the Socratic method. And I'll tell you, Socrates, got the idea from God because all you have to do is read Job chapter 38 through 41 and, talk about the master asking good questions. But then Jesus really, really honed in on this. He always asked the right question at the right time, and for a whole bunch of different reasons. But for our reasons today, we're going to talk about 2. He did it to engage others, and he did it to teach a lesson. Because if you ask thoughtful questions, they help you connect with others. It also helps you not look like a stinking know-it-all when you go on there and wow, this is this. You ask questions, and it sounds like, and you should be concerned with what are they thinking? What do they think about this? And then listen. It also helps you define the real problem. And that's really important. I used to work, you're going to think, wow, yeah, 1,000 different jobs. I did. I worked as at a health club selling memberships and when I was in college, and actually it was in between college. I thought I was done with college, so I did that for a year, and then I thought, okay, I have to go back. But anyway, this big buff guy comes in, and I thought, oh, we have an awesome weight room. I can't wait to show him our free weights, and it was huge. So I take him through there. I spent like 15 minutes showing him all these different things and stuff. And then I said, okay, we have a pool. You go through the men's locker room. I'll go through the women's. I'll meet you on the other side of the pool. So I get to the other side, and I'm waiting, and like, oh, he must have gone to the bathroom. But he comes out, and he goes, where's your steam room? And I said, oh, we have a dry sauna. Oh, well, my doctor wants me to use the steam room, so I guess I'm not going to join. And he turned around and walked out, and I was like, maybe I should have asked him, what are you looking for when he first walked in? That would have saved a lot of time. So what does that have to do with this? Everything. That helps you frame the right issues. You do not want to, after you just learned all this wonderful stuff, go up to somebody, knock on a door, talk to them, and say, okay, look how long it took me to go through that. I did that so you would know it all, understand it all, but what you want to do is start at the beginning. Are you planning to vote in November? You can ask this of a friend, a stranger you knock the door of, or a coworker. And then if they say no, then I would ask them, oh, why aren't you voting? And then find out why. Be curious. It doesn't matter. My vote doesn't count. I don't like the presidential choices. I can't stand Harris. I can't stand Trump. I was thinking about going in and writing in, but I don't want to stand in line just to write in Jesus or just to write in my mother. So you find out what it is, and then you can follow up with, what are your thoughts on Amendment 3? Very benign, easy questions, just to open the door. But here's where it gets tough. You have to listen. You have to hear, what are their reasons? What do they think about it? They may not know anything about it. They may have some very strong thoughts on it, but you need to hear and listen. Now, before you make this first contact, pray every single time before every single person. You need to pray and ask God to just give you wisdom, help you to be winsome, help you to be patient, help you be a good listener, and give you the words. Mark 13:11 says, and when they bring you to trial and deliver you over, do not be anxious beforehand about what you are to say, but say what is given you in that hour, for it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit. We're not talking about getting arrested here, hopefully, but in a sense, we are kind of heading into a trial where you will be cross-examined. You give them your opinion, and they're going, well, what about this? And well, what about that? And so, you just need to realize, if you've done your homework, you've read through it, you understand the issue, then you just got to rely on the Holy Spirit. In that time. And I also recommend, please do not get into the weeds about the presidential race. I recommend you don't go into talking about all the other amendments. In my opinion, this is the single most important moral issue on the ballot in November. I feel like everything kind of hinges on this and how we attack that. And if they ask you what your thoughts are, say, well, we could talk about that later, but this is really important to me. I'd like to know, what do you think about this? And then I'll give you some more ideas on questions. The good news is if you do this right, people will then come back and ask you, so what do you think about this amendment? I mean, if you can win them over, then all of a sudden now they're thinking, boy, she does her homework, she's done her research. I've had people say, just send me what judges you want. Can you just take a screenshot of your sample ballot? And I'm like, sure, but I don't push that on them. They ask me, I'm like, okay. So these are some good questions to follow up. So they tell you what they think about Amendment 3, and you say, well, what are your reasons for having that stance? And I would ask that even if they said, oh, I'm voting against it. So what are your reasons? Why are you voting no? And you could say, I'm voting no also. I'm curious to know, what was the main issue for you? Because that's really helpful for the next person that you talk to. It's just great. You learn that way about what people think. And if they say they're voting yes, you need to know. You need to be able to frame the right issues. What are your reasons? Let's say that the answer is, well, we really should have had an exception for rape or incest. I think a good follow-up question, but you have to be careful how you do it, because you don't want to sound snarky or like you're challenging them. But you can ask them very kindly, oh, do you personally know somebody who's dealt with that? And the reason why I ask this is because I talked to a woman and she said, yes, my daughter was raped when she was 16. And everybody was telling her to have an abortion, and I talked her into not having one. And apparently the young man, 37-year-old man now, and she says he's a great guy, etc. Now, that was somebody who is voting no on Amendment 3, but my point is, you don't know everybody's story. We act like, oh, that's so rare. Well, rare doesn't mean it never happens, so we can't assume that it never happens. And then if they say that they know somebody, what's the first thing that you need to say after that? It's not rhetorical. What would you say after that?
I'm sorry.
I am so sorry. I am so sorry. How is she doing? You know, how are you doing? You know, I mean, let's be real, people. These are people made in the image of God. I had one of my students, because I do a two-part thing on abortion in the second half of the semester, and one of my students a couple of years ago, she said that we do these little mock conversations, and she starts rattling off, you know, the percentages and all of this, and I just said, whoa, stop, and I just looked at the class and I go, is that the way to go with this? And everybody's like going, she needs to say she's really sorry. I'm like, yes. So remember, that's how we're showing genuine interest in people. And then you can say, have you seen the full proposed text? Or you could say, you know, depending on how the conversation is going, you're going to let the Spirit guide you. You might say, what do you think this amendment will regulate or restrict? And then you have to just listen and hear, what are they saying? They may say, well, I think it's restricting the fetal, you know, abortion after fetal viability. And then you can say, well, have you seen the full proposed text? And then, yeah, I've seen it. And then you can show them this here. And then they, yeah. So here where it says allow abortion to be restricted or banned, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would have preferred heartbeat, but, you know, at least there's restriction. Well, this is the full text. And what it actually says in this section, it says the General Assembly may enact law. You know, you go in and then you explain to them just using the actual, this is why I like this, is because there's no slick advertising. It's just you and the other person just being real and looking what's actually there. You may have somebody question if you hand them something, did you doctor it? Did you print this up? And then this is what I suggest that they do. And you may not even have something handy with you and you're talking to somebody standing in line somewhere. You can show them how to pull it up on their phone. They can Google Secretary of State 2024 ballot measures and you'll get this. This is the actual address that'll come up. If you feel like writing it down, you can, or you can literally Google it. This is what will come up, and it'll show you the following ballot measures have been certified, etc. Make sure that you've got the right election, November 5th, 2024. You can see it says Amendment 2 there, so you scroll. Luckily, it's 3, so it's the next one. And then there it is, Amendment 3. Then you need to click on the live link that says full text. When you click on that, you get this weird funky picture here, and then you get a picture of, I don't even know why they still have this on here, but you have a picture of the petition on the other side, which, you know, it's a moot point now because it's on the ballot. So you need to click on that second picture, and then what'll come up is the actual proposed language that I have for you on the other side of that paper. If you're doing it on a phone, when you pull it up, it comes up on this little window, and then you have to sit there scrolling and trying to read that little tiny writing. I did on my laptop, and you can click and drag, copy it onto a Word document, print it out. But that's where I got the actual amendment language. So to finish up, keep friends, influence people for Christ, because if you do this right, you may be able to share the gospel with them at some point. You know, you haven't turned them off. You don't want to turn them off so that people just avoid you whenever they see you. So listen with respect. Always express compassion. Saying, well, life is a life, you know, it's a platitude that rings hollow like, well, love is love. You know, so make sure that you're actually having real conversations with people. And remember that we don't always know everyone's story. So just be very open to that. And if you cannot change their mind, then you can make sure that you don't slam the door shut and just say, thank you so much for having this conversation with me and talking with me. I respect that, you have a different point of view. And, we have to respect differing points of view because we live in America. But I will say that I've been extremely successful in getting people to understand how this is, and I've had somebody question, well, how do you know that you really changed their mind? And I'm like, well, if they ask me for a sign, if I drive by, I see the sign is up, I'm thinking they're probably telling the truth. And some of the people that I explain this to are so blown away and angry that they're like, I had no idea. I thought this had restriction in it. That's kind of what they're leading you to believe. So anyway, so that's all I got. Does anybody have any questions?
Have you encountered people that are not moderates and had successful conversations that are more on the extreme of
No.
how you even
No.
have a conversation?
No. If somebody believes that is completely, I had a discussion with a woman many years ago when the cloning thing was going to be put on the amendment, and I was talking to her, and she literally yelled in my face, "I don't believe it's a life," and I tried to ask her some questions back. I'm like, what do you think it is? It's just a clump of cells. And I go, well, what type of cells? And she goes, I don't even want to talk to you. It's not a life. And she was for abortion through all 9 months. I mean, she literally didn't care. I don't think that you're going to change somebody's mind like that with reason. That's the type of person you need to walk away from and pray for, that God would open their eyes. And the thing is that God does open eyes. There are a lot of people out there and a lot of public figures, a lot of abortion doctors, former abortion doctors and nurses who have changed their minds on this, that are now 100% pro-life. So there is redemption. There is, God does open eyes. But we don't have much time, so I wouldn't waste my time, and I don't want to say that in a callous way, but I wouldn't spend time with somebody that I'm probably not going to change, that's really, really radically extreme, when I could be talking to somebody that is somewhere in here. So I have, if anybody's interested, these little things here. I think these are your two strongest arguments. So if you think somebody thinks that there is a restriction in here, then this is a really helpful one to hand them that shows where it sounds like it's going to restrict after fetal viability, but then you can show them that that's the real. This is just a single point thing that you can hand somebody. This other one here, I think, is super strong. Why, if everything is so fine, then why did they not put that you can't penalize anyone for anything? And then when they say, well, I don't want the boyfriend that drives her down there to get thrown into jail. What if the doctor accidentally perforates the uterus during the course of the abortion? What if the girl gets the abortion pills from Planned Parenthood and goes home and takes them, and then she ends up with sepsis and she dies from an infection, which is what happened with Amber Thurman. That was a complicated one. The hospital was negligent, but I mean, there are situations. So that means that, well, you can't sue. Parents can't sue.
In this situation, it says that really there's no limitations that somebody who's not even a doctor could do an abortion.
Well, exactly.
Which is what they were doing at the Planned Parenthood downtown, which is what that got them shut down by the health department, was they had unlicensed people, medical students, that sort of thing, performing abortions.
Well, and so here's the thing, again, a super strong argument is if you think that voting yes on this is going to put us back to where we were before, no, it's not. It's going way beyond.
Right.
This is absolutely the most direct. If we pass this amendment, we will be one of the we'll be the 7th, unless other states, gets theirs passed, most radical abortion law states in the entire country, limitless abortion, plus Washington, D.C., which is obviously a district, not a state. But, I mean, that's not where most Missourians are. I mean, maybe that's okay for California, or maybe New York is fine with that, but that's not Missouri, And so here's another argument. Somebody says, I think the ban went too far. So this came up a few weeks ago, and I said, okay, instead of arguing with them, you had you didn't. You're not old enough. I'm not even old enough to say we had 50 years to argue, what is a life, and it starts at conception. We can argue that we knew from the 1940s that conception is when life begins, and that's where all the DNA. We had all that time. We need to defeat this now, in the next few days, because people are voting. We don't really have time to get into the weeds with people about that. We need to find out why are they voting yes on this, and then just attack that so we can defeat it. And I would say to people, make sure that you defeat it. And if that means that you have to tell somebody who thinks the ban went too far, well, let's defeat this, and then contact your representative or your legislator and tell them that, hey, I would have preferred a heartbeat bill or whatever, then go ahead and contact them, because we can have that argument. We can come back and discuss that then. Right now, we just need those moderate people to vote no. We need to get them on our side right now, because this was polling at 58% a few weeks ago that it would pass. The last time I checked, it was down to 52%, which means that people were having some inroads. I'm concerned that if too many people are just highlighting just the gender transition thing, that if somebody reads an article that says, oh, that's not in here, and then they look at the text and they're like, I don't see anything about that in there, that they might flip back. So we have to be super careful about how accurate we are when we're talking to people about things. So anyway, so that's kind of how I am handling it. And then this is the last thing I'll say is, if you're passionate about this, as I am, let's not, after the election, let's say that God intervenes and it's defeated. We can't just go, yay, we're done. We're not. Planned Parenthood is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and this is going to come up again and again. That was just a legislative bill, that ban. They want to get this in the constitutions across America. That's their goal, and they have a lot of lawyers that know how to write this kind of language, and they know exactly the ads and you've probably seen the ads. They're horrific. And so let's just continue to take this kind, respectful way of teaching people why this is important. And we need to support young unwed mothers. We need to, support and give to institutions like Thrive and stuff like that, so that we are not just, guilty of, have the baby and then figure it out. So, anything else? All right, let's just pray. Lord, I just thank you for this time together. Thank you for their patience, for a long presentation here, Lord. But I just pray that everybody would have just the courage, the boldness, and the compassion to go and speak truth to people in a winsome way, so that we can change hearts and minds, and eventually just win people over for your kingdom, Lord. And we just thank you again just for the freedom and the opportunity to do this. In Jesus' name, amen.